So in this video, I'm going to recap the stuff that we talked about in class, introducing the Odyssey text. And then what I'll do is take you through the first 2 pages of Greek text. And then you can make some notes based on that. At the moment, the easiest way is probably to just put comments. You can put comments on the Google Doc that we share, or if you'd rather, you can put comments on your own copy of the Google Doc or on some other document that you have. And then that way we can look in class together, not in the next lesson, because we'll spend that on language work, but in the next literature lesson, which would be the one after that. And we'll be able to go through the text more quickly because you'll have had a chance to watch this in advance. So first of all, the recap. So this is the Odyssey is part of the story of the Trojan War, a mythical war between the ancient Greeks and the city of Troy. And at the end of the war, the Greeks win, but they have to get home. And some of them are dead already in the war, but the ones who survive have what I call nostoi, which means homecomings. So I'll type in here the word that I'm talking about. I'll type it up here in the margin. The word is nostos, N-O-S-T-O-S. It means a homecoming. So various different Greek heroes have different sorts of homecomings. Menelaus has quite a nice homecoming with his wife Helen. Agamemnon is the opposite end of the spectrum because he has a terrible homecoming. His wife Clytemnestra kills him. And then somewhere in the middle we have Odysseus. Odysseus's homecoming is the most famous one because there's a whole epic poem written about it, which is the Odyssey. Odysseus takes 10 years to get home, and he encounters all sorts of adventures on the way, the Sirens, the Cyclops, the Lystrigonians, all sorts of different people and monsters. Scylla and Charybdis is another adventure that he has. And he gets home to his island, which is called Ithaca, I-T-H-A-C-A. And he's been away for 20 years, 10 years in the war and 10 years coming home, 10 years on the journey home from the war. So he's been away for 20 years and he comes home in disguise because he has no army left. His men are all dead. So he has to come home in disguise. And he basically works out who is, loyal to him and who isn't. Because what he finds is his wife, Penelope, is now surrounded by suitors, men who want to marry her. And some people have sided with the suitors, while other people are waiting for Odysseus to get home. So Odysseus encounters various people. One of the most important is his son, Telemachus. And when Odysseus left for Troy, Telemachus was just a baby, but now, of course, 20 years has passed. 20 years have passed, and so Telemachus is a young adult. He also encounters 2 faithful servants, 2 servants who have remained loyal to him over the years. One is called Eumaeus, E-U-M-A-E-U-S, and Eumaeus is a swineherd. So his job is looking after pigs, like a shepherd, but for pigs. And the other one is a guy called Philoetius. Okay, and Philoetius's job is that he is a cow herd, so he looks after the cows. So you've got Telemachus the son, and then these 2 loyal servants, Eumaeus and Philoetius. And there are other servants who have not remained loyal, particularly one called Melanthius, who is a goat herd who has joined with the suitors. And we'll hear more about him in a bit. So what Odysseus does is he arranges for a contest. And the idea is that Odysseus's bow, which is very hard to use, you have to be very strong to use it. Odysseus's bow is in the palace. And the challenge is that you have to string the bow and shoot an arrow through a set of axes, which have been arranged. And this is something that Odysseus can do as a feat of strength and skill, but no one else so far can do that. So that's the challenge. And whoever is able to do it gets Penelope. And what happens is Odysseus, in disguise, shoots the bow and wins the contest. And of course, the suitors are very unhappy. And Odysseus basically reveals himself and he starts killing the suitors. Now, of course, he has the bow and they do not have weapons. They try to run away, but they discover that Odysseus's allies, the Eumaeus, Philoetius, his son Telemachus, have locked them in the room. So they are trapped in the room with Odysseus. At one point, though, the disloyal servant, Melanthius the goatherd, goes to the weapons storeroom and fetches some weapons for the suitors. And now Melanthius goes again to the storeroom to collect some weapons, but this time Odysseus is prepared, so he sends Eumaeus and Philoetius to sort of intercept Melanthius in the weapons storeroom. And that's where our passage in Book 22 begins. Also, just a couple of points to mention about the Odyssey as a poem. We don't know who composed it. We don't know where it was composed, probably on the western coast of what is now Turkey, or possibly one of the Greek islands. And we also don't know exactly when it was written. Sometime around 700 BC is roughly when it was written, or at least when it was composed. It might have been written down later, but it was composed in some way by a poet or a group of poets around 700 BC. It might have the same author or composer as the Iliad, or it might not. The name Homer is one that we use for these poems for convenience, right? We don't know historically that anyone called Homer existed. If they did exist, we don't know anything about them. Okay, so let's go into the text. So we'll start, of course, on page 1. And as you can see, the text starts, hos ephat. Now, hos means so, or in this way. And ephat means he or she spoke. This is short for ephato, like that, ephato. And you'll see this often in Homer, that when a speech comes to an end, the narrator says, so he spoke, or so she spoke. So hos ephato, or hos ephath. Here it's eliding into the next word, which is hoi. So that's one that you'll see a lot. So he spoke. And he, in this context, refers to Odysseus, who has just instructed Eumaeus and Philoetius to go and intercept Melanthius in the storeroom. Okay, so he spoke. Hoide and they, right? Hoi in this situation means they, these men, the men. Literally, it's the definite article, the, but because it's masculine plural, we can say they. So, and they. Now, this word mala here, this word mala means a lot or very much. So literally, they very much listened to him. That sounds a bit strange in English. It might be better to say they willingly listened to him. Now, the word listened is over here, kluon, they listened. Now, in sort of later ancient Greek, the ancient Greek of Plato and others, the verb that you use for hearing is akouo. But in Homeric Greek, the verb is kluo. Okay, so they listened to him. Now, kluo, like akouo, takes genitive, and the genitive is over here, to, right? They listened willingly to him. And, now the word for and is erde, which is over here. Again, this is different from later Greek. In later Greek, the word for and would be kai, like that, kai, K-A-I. But in Homeric Greek, you often get erde. So they willingly listened to him and they obeyed, epithonto. Now this is quite a common verb. The active of the verb is peitho, which means I persuade, but the middle form is peithomai, which means I obey. Right? The idea is I am persuaded and therefore I obey. So epithonto means they obeyed. Okay. And then ban de imen. Now ban comes from the verb bino, to go. So literally they went to go, imen. So imen means to go. And so yes, that's an infinitive. In later Greek, that verb would be erkomai, so the infinitive erkestai, but this is again Homeric Greek, so imen meaning to go. So literally they went to go, or you could say they started to go, to the storeroom. Now s, this word s, which is here, es, in later Greek that will become eis, E-I-S, into. But in Homer, it's just S. So they started to go into the thalamos, the storeroom. Thalamos means a room in general. Could be a bedroom or some other sort of room. In this case, it's for weapons. So it's the storeroom. And, der, and, they latheten. Now this word latheten, this is a form called the dual form, which exists in Homer. It disappears in later Greek, and it's halfway between singular and plural. So singular is one person, plural is multiple people, but dual is for two people, right? Because we're talking about Eumaeus and Philœtius. So they two, the two of them, literally escaped the notice of, or slipped past, him, min. Okay, now min in later Greek would be auton, right? Him, the one, being, eonta, being, present participle from the verb to be, being endon, which means inside, like endothermic, for instance. So literally they escaped the notice of him being inside. Or in better English, they escaped the notice of the one who was inside. Okay, so let's go on into the second sentence there. So we don't really need to worry about these first two words, toy. That just means something like now, right? These are just little particles that move the story along. So now, he was seeking. So the verb is over here, eryuna. The verb is eryunao, which means to seek or look for, eryunao. And here, this is the imperfect tense. He was seeking, he was looking for. And the subject would be Melanthius, the disloyal goatherd. So he was looking for, and the object is tukeia, which is a little bit shortened here, tukeia, which means weapons. So he was looking for weapons. Where? Kata mukon. Kata means throughout or in, right? You're looking throughout a place. He was looking for weapons in a mukon. Now, a mukos is a corner. So he was looking for weapons in the corner, or in a corner, of the storeroom. Thalamoia. Now, this is another thing to notice, okay? Because in later ancient Greek, the genitive singular ending for masculine is u, right? So what you would get is something like this. You would get tha, la, mu. But in Homeric Greek, instead of thalamu, you get thalamoia, right? It's a different genitive ending, oia. So thalamoia means of the room, of the storeroom. So now he was seeking weapons in the corner of the storeroom, okay? And to, that's another dual form, so it means the two of them. And the main verb is estan, that means they stood. The two of them stood. Hekaterthe, that means on either side. Hekaterthe, on either side. Parastathmoisi, by the stathmois, that's a dative plural, by the doorposts, right? Stathmos is a doorpost. So they stood on either side by the doorposts, menonte, waiting, right? This is from meno, to remain or wait, and it's a dual participle. So wait, so it means the two of them waiting. So they stood on either side by the doorposts, waiting. So they are laying a trap for Melanthius, the disloyal goat herd. Okay, then let's go on to the next sentence. So euth, right? Eute means when in Homeric Greek. Okay, so when, and the subject is Melanthios. So when Melanthios, and he's described as Ipolos Igon. Ipolos means a herder, H-E-R-D-E-R, someone who herds animals, a herder of goats. Igon is the genitive plural of Ix. Right, the word is Ix, A-I-X, and the genitive singular is Igos, and that means a goat. Okay, so when Melanthius, a herder of goats, or herder of goats, was stepping, bine, imperfect tense of bino, to go, was going, huper udon, huper, like hyper in English, means over, and an udos is a threshold. So when Melanthius, herder of goats, was going over the threshold, pheron, that's the present participle from phero, so it means carrying. Te hetere kedi, that means with one hand, right? Keir is a hand, and heteros means like one or another. So with one hand, te hetera kedi, he was carrying one thing, and then with the other, te hetere again, he was carrying something else. So carrying with one hand a kalen trufalea. Now kalos means beautiful, and a trufalea is a helmet. Okay, so carrying with one hand a beautiful helmet, and with the other, you notice men and de setting up the contrast, right? With one hand he's carrying a helmet, but with the other he's carrying a sakos euru geron. Okay, eurus means wide or broad, geron means old, and sakos is a shield. So with the other, carrying a wide, old shield. And the shield is described as pepalagmenon asder. Now, pepalagmenon is a perfect passive participle from the verb palasso, which means to stain something or mark something. So literally means stained with So here you've got a dative singular, as der. You can recognize the dative singular from the iota subscript. And as der means mold, M-O-U-L-D. So in other words, it's a very old shield that hasn't been used for a long time. And we're about to find out why, because this is the shield laerteo heroos, genitive case, of the hero, heros means hero, of the hero Laertes. Now Laertes, by the way, is the father of Odysseus, who's still alive. And that's why the shield is getting old and moldy, because Laertes is an old man, so he hasn't used the shield for a long time. Okay, so with one hand he's carrying a beautiful helmet, with the other a broad old shield stained with mold of the hero Laertes, which, the one which he used to carry, Laertes used to carry, foreesce, imperfect of the verb foreo, to carry, right, which has the same meaning really as phero, to carry, which he used to carry, kurisdon. Now, kurisdo is a verb that means to be young, to be youthful. And this is a participle. So literally, the one which he used to carry, being young. Or in English, we would say, as a young man, something like that. So he used to carry it around. Okay. But now, erde means by now or already, and these particles just emphasize this, right? But now, it was lying there, kator. This is from the verb kamai, to lie down. So in the old days, Laertes used to carry this shield, but now the shield was lying down, okay? And there, the raphi, the seams of the straps, hemantone, genitive plural, of the straps, had been loosened, le lunto, pluperfect passive of luo, to loosen or set free. So in other words, the shield is falling apart because it hasn't been used for so long. Okay. So let's go on there. Okay. So, the two of them. Okay. And then we've got a participle here, an aorist participle, epaixant, and then you can see it elides into the next word. That means having sprung at him. Right? So the two of them, having sprung at him, heleten, this is another dual form, they seized him. This comes from the verb hyreo, to seize or capture. And it's a dual form because there are two of them doing it. So having sprung at him, they seized him. Or you could say they sprang at him and seized him. And they erusan, this is the aorist of eruo, which means drag. They dragged him, min. Remember, min is the Homeric equivalent of auton, right? So they dragged him aso, inside. And then kurix is a very unusual Greek word. It means by the hair. If you drag someone kurix, you're dragging them by pulling their hair. They dragged him inside by the hair. And there, they threw him, ballon, right, aorist of ballo, to throw. They threw him, kamai. Now, kamai means on the ground. And then endapedo means on the floor. So Homer is basically saying the same thing twice for emphasis. They threw him to the ground on the floor, something like that. They threw him, and I just said they threw him down, so I translated kamai as down. They threw him down on the ground. And he is described as aknumenon care. That means grieving, aknumenon, participle, at heart. Care is your heart. So literally grieving at heart or distressed at heart. And there, they bound, deon, aorist of the verb deo, I bind or tie up, right? They bound his podas, his feet, and his keiras, and his hands. They bound his feet and hands sun, right? Sun means with or together. They bound his feet and hands together with thumalge desmo. Now, thumalgos is an adjective that comes from thumos, meaning your heart, your spirit, and algos, which means pain. So literally spirit pain, spirit hurting. Desmos. Desmos means binding or a chain or a fetter or a bond, something like that. So something like with heart grieving bondage or binding or something like that. So in other words, with binding that upsets him, basically. Right. And then it says, so what they're doing is, right, they're tying his feet and hands together after they've tied them behind his back, right? So this is the next bit. Having bound, apostrepsante, this is a dual aorist participle. Apostrepho is to turn back. So literally having turned them back, very well, mala meaning very, and eu meaning well, and then diamperes means something like all the way. So having well and properly turned them back all the way. In other words, having bound them firmly behind his back, something like that. Hos, as the huios, the son of Laertes, laer ta'o, that's a genitive form, right? As the son of Laertes, i.e. Odysseus, had ordered ekeleusen, right? And then in case we weren't sure who the son of Laertes was, Homer says, polutlas dios Odysseus. Polutlas means much suffering or much enduring, and dios means godlike or noble. So much enduring, noble Odysseus. And these words they're called epithets, and they're very frequently used of Odysseus. Okay, and then we have another dual participle, peirenante, having bound, having tied, a seiren plekten. A plekten plektos is an adjective that means twisted or knotted or plaited, and a seira is a rope. So having bound a twisted rope from him, ex autu, in English we might say to him, right? And the main verb is erusan, they dragged, right? They dragged, aorist tense, weak aorist, they dragged him. You have to imagine an object like auton or min. They dragged him up, right? Anna is the full word. Anna, A-N-A, means up. They dragged him up the hypselen kiona. Hypselos means high or tall, and kion means a pillar. So they dragged him up the tall pillar, and they brought him near. Pelasdo means to bring something near to something else. So they neared him, they brought him near to the dokoisi, and a dokos is a roof beam, right? One of the bits of wood that holds the roof up. So in other words, they haven't just tied him up, they've tied him up high. So it's even harder for him to escape. And then let's just do this last bit of the page here, right? So, or then, der, and epikertomeo, present participle, that means mocking. The verb epikertomeo means I mock. So mocking him, ton, and that refers to Melanthius, of course, mocking him, prosephes, you spoke to him. right? So the narrator is addressing Eumaeus. He's saying, Eumaeus, you spoke to Melanthius, you addressed him. And then the narrator calls Eumaeus Eumae, that's the vocative, Eumaeus, subota. And subota, a subotes, is a swineherd. So the narrator says, mocking him, you spoke to him, swineherd Eumaeus. So the narrator is talking to swineherd Eumaeus and saying, oh yeah, you spoke to Melanthius, didn't you? Okay, so we'll stop there. We'll go through that passage, those first 2 pages, on Tuesday. Discuss them a bit, clarify any parts that you're confused about, and then I'll make a similar video for the next chunk.